Sometimes we got to be reminded of what God has in store for you is good. God had something good in store for them. And so this is where we find ourselves. But then in verse 25, for the first time, we actually hear from the spies, and they give a report. It says, when they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, that should cause you to perk up, 40, time of testing, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey. And this is its fruit. Nevertheless, everybody say nevertheless. That nevertheless can get us in trouble. The people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites and are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. So now they're giving back the report. They're not in overt sin yet. Right? They're just following what they were told to do. They're reporting the facts. Sometimes facts, when it's not in addition with faith, can get you in trouble. They're reporting the facts, and here's the fact. The fruit is great. The land is great, but there's some giants. We talked about this a while back when we were in our series in the book of Acts, is that typically when you're following the purposes of God, you have two things happening simultaneously. You have opportunity and you have opposition. Whenever you see opportunity, you should know that there's probably some opposition that you're going to have to deal with. And whenever you have opposition, don't lose hope, because probably somewhere around the corner, if you keep looking, there's some opportunities there as well. It's just disguised right now. And so what the report back is that yes, there's some great things in this land. It does indeed flow with milk and honey, but there's some giants there. And so you can kind of get the sense here that there's a little bit of trepidation. And so Caleb comes. I love Caleb because Caleb is a man of faith here. And here's what he says in verse 30. He quieted the people before Moses and said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it. Don't you love that voice of faith? And then from then on, wouldn't it be great if the people kind of responded like, William Wallace and Braveheart right before you're going into battle and saying, guys, we could take it, we could do it, it's ours, And they all just jump up in a loud cheer of faith and say, yes, the Lord has given us this land. We're going to go and take possession of it by faith. And they rise up together and say, you know what, let's walk into the promises hand in hand, guys. And the children of Israel lived happily ever after. Is that what you guys have in your Bibles? No, that's not what you, okay, I don't have that either. What we'll find is that the voice of faith becomes the minority voice in the midst of all the other voices that come up after that. And in verse 31, now we see things go from bad to worse. Actually, it wasn't really bad at this point, but now it's going to start turning for the worse. Listen to their interpretation of the facts starting in verse 31. It says, but the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, are part of the Nephilim. That was kind of like, like the boogeyman. I mean, these were people that people were intimidated by. And we became like grasshoppers in our own sight. And so we were in their sight. It's like, well, how do you know? Did you take a poll? Did you kind of, hey, what do you guys think about us? I just want to kind of get a little bit of intel. How do you know that? It's funny how we can project our own fears on other people. And so it said, we became like grasshoppers. Dr. Steve said before he knew the text I was preaching, it says, "You are not a grasshopper today." I was like, okay, that's the encouragement you need sometimes. But here's one of the ways that you can tell that you are being influenced by the wrong voice. Because the voice of doubt, the voice of fear, always questions the power of God. Notice what they said in verse 31. In verse 31, it said this, "But the men who had gone up with him said, 'We are not able to go up against this people.'" We are not able. I thought it was God that was going to bring them into it. See, be careful of viewing God's promises through the lens of your own ability. Sometimes we look and what we call trust in God is really saying, "God, I trust you up until the point that I can do it myself." But what we find in this story is that they did not trust what God said, they trust what they could do. And they began to minimize the power of God. What they should have done is said, "Well, I don't know how God is going to do it, but you know what? God delivered us out of Egypt. And God was the one who provided food for us in the middle of the wilderness. So somehow or another, God is powerful enough to bring us where we need to go." But what we find is that the voice of faith was drowned out by all the doubt and fear. And when you have that voice that's competing with the promises of God, what you'll find is that it always questions the power of God. And now they become like grasshoppers.